I want to be upfront about something before I start this story. I am not a dramatic person. I'm not someone who catastrophizes. I'm a mid-40s logistics coordinator who has driven a lot of miles for work, stayed in a lot of cheap motels, and had exactly zero problems doing it for about 15 years. That track record ended on a Tuesday night in a small town in rural Oklahoma. I'm not going to name the town, and I'm not going to name the motel. That's a deliberate choice. Not because I'm protecting anyone, but because this story involves a legal situation that I was told to be careful about discussing publicly. What I will tell you is that this is real. It happened to me, and the details are accurate. I was on a long work trip, a 3-week stretch where I was driving a circuit through small and mid-sized towns in 3 states, meeting with warehouse operators, checking inventory systems, doing the kind of unglamorous work that keeps supply chains running. My company gave me a daily expense allowance for accommodations, and in the rural stretches, that money went a long way, which meant I was frequently staying in small, independent motels rather than chain hotels. Usually that was fine. Sometimes you got a surprisingly decent room. Sometimes you got a questionable mattress and a TV that only got 3 channels. But nothing dangerous. Never anything dangerous. Until that Tuesday. I'd been driving since morning, and I was running behind schedule because of a meeting that ran long. By the time I reached this particular town, it was almost 10:30 at night. I was exhausted. I'd been behind the wheel for 3 hours, and I just needed to stop. My GPS showed exactly one motel in this town, a small, independently owned place right at the edge of the main road, just before the highway continued out into 40 miles of dark nothing. I pulled in. The place it had a feeling. I noticed the feeling immediately, and I ignored it immediately, which is something I've thought about a lot since then. There were maybe 12 rooms arranged in an L shape around a small parking lot, the old-fashioned drive-up style where you park right in front of your room door. The office was a small, glass-fronted box at the entrance. The vacancy sign was on. The parking lot was almost empty, just one pickup truck parked at the far end near room 12. I went into the office. The man behind the desk was somewhere between 50 and 65. It was hard to tell. Lean, with a weathered face wearing a flannel shirt. He was watching a small TV on the counter, and he looked up when I came in with an expression that wasn't unfriendly exactly, but wasn't warm either. Just flat. Assessing. We did the transaction. Cash or card, he asked. I said card. He ran it without looking at me, slid a key across the counter, an actual physical key, not a key card, and said, "Room 11, ice machine's broke." That was the entirety of our interaction. Room 11 was at the far end of the short arm of the L, which meant it was somewhat separated from the rest of the rooms. I noticed that the room next to mine, room 12, was the one with the pickup truck outside it. The curtains were drawn, but there was light around the edges. Someone was there. I carried my bag in, locked the door, threw the deadbolt, and wedged the chain lock. Old motel habit. I always did all 3. I also propped a rubber door wedge under the door. I carried one specifically for budget motels after a door latch failed on me years ago at a motel in Nevada. Nothing sinister happened that time, but it scared me enough to start carrying the wedge. The room was standard issue, a little musty, bedspreads that had seen better decades, a bathroom with a light that buzzed. I showered, changed, checked my emails, made a few notes about the next day's meetings, and was in bed by about 11:30. I left my small bedside lamp on. I often do that in unfamiliar places, just a preference. At some point, I checked my phone later and it was 1:17 a.m. I woke up. No dramatic sound, no loud bang, just awake. That jarring, alert kind of awake that means something registered in your sleep. I lay still for a moment, orienting myself. Motel room, Oklahoma, Tuesday night. Then I heard it. Footsteps outside my door. slow, stopping right outside. I heard someone try the door handle, slow and quiet, like they were trying not to make noise. The handle turned down, held for a second, then released, then silence. I was sitting up in bed by this point, my heart going. I was watching the door. In the faint light from my bedside lamp, I could see the door handle, and I could see that it wasn't moving anymore. I could see the deadbolt was thrown. I could see the chain was on. I could see the wedge under the door. I sat there for probably 5 full minutes, barely breathing, watching that door. Then, and this is the part that really got me, I saw a shadow under the door shift. Someone's feet standing right outside. The gap under old motel doors is big enough that you can see light underneath, and the way that light was interrupted told me exactly where someone was standing. They were standing right outside my door, motionless, standing there. I got up from the bed. I moved to the corner of the room farthest from the door, not because I was hiding, but because I wanted my back to a wall. I found my phone. I pulled up the emergency dial screen and had 911 ready to go. Then I grabbed the heaviest thing in the room that I could swing, which turned out to be the lamp from the desk after I quietly unplugged it. I know what you're thinking. But here's the thing. I wasn't in a state where I was going to have a calm, strategic thought. I was in a small motel room in the middle of rural Oklahoma at 1 a.m. Someone was trying my door handle, and they were now standing silently right outside. Your brain doesn't do calm strategy in that moment. Your brain does survive. I thought about calling out, "Who's there?" But I decided against it. I didn't want them to know exactly where in the room I was. I didn't want to give anything away. After what felt like forever but was probably 3 or 4 minutes, the shadow moved. The feet shuffled. I could hear it. And then footsteps moving away, back toward the other rooms. I heard the door to room 12 open and close. The truck. Room 12. The person next door. Now here's where you might be thinking, okay, maybe it was just a guest who was confused about which room was theirs. Maybe they were a little drunk, maybe it was innocent. And I would have landed on exactly that conclusion. Weird, a little unsettling, but explainable. Except for what happened next. About 40 minutes later I heard it again. Footsteps back to my door. Handle tried again. Same slow, quiet testing. Then knocking. Quiet knocking, not the loud, "Hey, wrong room" kind. The quiet, almost secretive kind. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 2 more. I called 911. I told the dispatcher my location, told them I was alone in a motel room, told them someone was repeatedly trying to access my room and I felt I was in danger. The dispatcher was calm and good, kept me on the line, told me units were being dispatched, told me not to open the door under any circumstances. Through the door I heard something that I haven't talked about much because it sounds so strange, but it's true. I heard a voice, low, male. He said, and I could barely make it out through the door, he said something like, "I just need to talk to you. I just need to talk to you." Said through a motel door at 2 a.m. to a stranger, in the dark, after trying the handle twice. I said nothing. I kept the dispatcher on the line and I kept that lamp in my hand and I kept my back to the wall. He stood there another minute, then footsteps away again.
The sheriff's deputy arrived about 18 minutes after I called. He and his partner spoke to the man in room 12. I wasn't present for that conversation. I watched from my window. What I could see was, the conversation got tense. The man was agitated. At one point, one of the deputies put his hand on his service weapon. And that image, a trained law enforcement officer putting his hand on his gun during a conversation with this person, told me everything I needed to know about whether my fear had been reasonable. They did not arrest him that night. I found out later, through a contact I have in law enforcement, that the man had a record. I was told it would not be appropriate for me to share the specifics of what kind of record. What I was told, privately and off the record, was that I was right to call. The deputies walked me to my car. I loaded my bag and I drove to the next town, 40 miles in the dark, and I found a chain hotel with an interior corridor and cameras everywhere. And I paid for a room with my own money because I didn't care about the expense report. I called my wife when I got to the new room. It was almost 4 in the morning. She answered on the second ring, heard my voice, and knew immediately something was wrong. I told her the whole thing. When I was done, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I want you to start staying at better hotels." And I said, "Yeah, me too." These days, when I travel for work, I book interior corridor hotels. I get rooms above the ground floor. I still travel the same circuit, still do the same work. But I listen to that feeling now, that flat, assessing look from a stranger, that instinct that says something is slightly off about this situation. I listen to it now. My father used to say something about hiking that I've applied to life generally. If the trail feels wrong, stop and check your map. The trail might be fine, or you might be about to walk off a cliff. Either way, it costs you nothing to stop and look. The trail felt wrong that night. I wish I'd listened an hour earlier. I'm grateful I eventually did. Thank you for listening. If you like this story, please consider like, comment, and subscribe the channel.